On this episode of How to Make Dinner, I am doing a cookbook test drive of Where Cooking Begins by Carla Lalli music. If you watch any amount of cooking shows on YouTube, which I'm guessing you do if you found yourself here, you're probably familiar with Carla Lalli music. I love Carla, I'm a big fan, so of course when this book came out, I jumped on it. And this isn't a new book, this came out last year, I think, 2019 maybe? Yeah, I bought it right away when it came out, but I have yet to cook things from it. So I thought, why not do an episode and we can make some of these things together. A few things I really like about this book. One, it's very beautiful. The photography is very, very nice and lovely. I like that in the beginning, she kind of goes into some really basic cooking techniques, talking about steaming, sauteing, braising, roasting, and giving you lots of ideas on when to apply different treatments to different things, and just giving you some nice ideas on things you wouldn't have thought of steaming or things that you wouldn't have thought of braising or roasting. So I really, really like that. Carla's style is really kind of freestyle, which I really like, and it's kind of in line with my style, so of course I gravitate towards that. She's got the recipes clearly laid out, but there are options to spin it, she says, so it's like putting your own spin on the recipe. So, you know, instead of using this lettuce, use this lettuce, or instead of using mushrooms, try whatever. So I really, really like that. It's very cool. And yeah, so far so good. I'm having fun. Okay, so let's make some things from this, shall we? First up, I'm gonna make fried grains with bacon, mushrooms, and kimchi, and that's on page 125. I've got a big pan heating up over here. It calls for a 10-inch skillet. This is about 10 inches, I think. I'm gonna heat some oil. A teaspoon, but I don't know, a glug. Add the bacon, so I've got some bacon here. It calls for thick cut bacon, but mine was pre-sliced and it's not super thick. So I'm cooking this till it's crisp and until most of the fat has rendered out, about 6 minutes. We'll see how that goes. It might be a bit quicker because my bacon's thinner. While the bacon is crisping, I'm going to prepare my mushrooms. It calls for hen of the woods or shiitake mushrooms, but then there's a spin it option to use creminis or any other kind of mushrooms. So I have some shiitakes. I'm just going to tear them into bits. But then I also have portobellos, which are kind of big. So I don't know if I'm going to tear them or slice them. And then I've got one cremini. Let's tear that up. With these portobellos, I am going to tear them. And I'm actually just going to scoop the brown gills out, because sometimes they just turn things really dark, and I don't want my whole dish to be dark brown. Turn this down a bit. So this is already looking pretty crispy, and it's only been about 2 minutes for the bacon. So I'm going to transfer the bacon to a little plate. Add mushrooms. Increase heat to medium-high. Whoops, that's why my bacon crisped so fast, because it was already on medium-high. Season with salt and toss. So here goes. These mushrooms will take a few minutes, so while they cook, I'll tell you about something else I made from this book earlier. This is the Buttery Beets with Grapefruit, and it's on page 92. This was a really, really nice one. I started by preparing the grapefruit. So first I used a vegetable peeler to take off a few wide strips. And then I kind of trimmed away as much of the white pith as possible because that's a little bit bitter. And then I took a slice from the top and a slice from the bottom of the grapefruit and then peeled around the sides with a sharp knife. At that point it says to cut another round from the grapefruit and squeeze the juice into a bowl to equal 2 tablespoons, but I got 2 tablespoons out of just using the top and the bottom. So that worked for me. And then I sliced the rest of the grapefruit into big rounds and put them on a platter. Into the grapefruit juice, I squeezed some ginger juice. So I did that by grating the ginger and then just squeezing it. And that was a lot of ginger juice, so I was happy about that. I love ginger. And then I sliced some shallots and put those into a bowl covered with water and then soaked them for 5 minutes. Next was the beets. So I peeled the beets and cut them into wedges. And these ones were on the small side, so I used a couple more than the recipe called for. I seasoned them with salt and then I put them into a skillet with some olive oil and just kind of tried to make sure that they were flat side down so that they could kind of cook and get a nice char on one side. They cooked on that one side for about 6 minutes and then I turned them over and kind of tossed them around and cooked them for another 4 to 5 minutes. So at this point I found that my pan was way too hot. So it was just getting a little bit scorched on the bottom. So instead of cooking the beets all the way through this way, I actually transferred them to the oven for about 10 minutes, just because they were still a little bit hard and the pan was getting really burned. And then as the beets were cooking, I drained the water from the sliced shallots and I added some vinegar, some salt and sesame oil to the shallots and just tossed them together with that. Then I made this sauce, which is basically a beurre blanc. So it's like a butter and citrus sauce. I poured the grapefruit and ginger juice into a pan and my pan was stupid hot because I cannot control this induction burner for the life of me. And then once this simmered, which really this more like evaporated because it was so hot, I quickly added the butter and I forgot to add the zest, but this is the point where I was supposed to add the zest. And then I just kind of cooked and stirred that around until the butter was a little bit browned. And then I laid out the grapefruit and the beets on a nice big platter and I spooned the sauce over them. And then I topped them with the kind of quick pickled shallots. And then I topped the whole thing with a big scattering of fresh cilantro. It calls for mint, but I didn't have any and I had cilantro, so that was it. And these were really, really nice. I will say when it came to room temperature, the butter kind of firmed up because butter does that. So I do think that these are best served on the warm side if possible. The mushrooms are almost done now. They're starting to kind of release a bunch of juice and they're starting to get tender. So I'm gonna chop the kimchi. I think the mushrooms are done enough now, so I'm gonna take them out. I'm gonna put them on this plate with the bacon if they fit. Maybe I needed a bigger plate. Get a bigger plate. Now I'm adding a tablespoon of oil back to the skillet, and there's some nice brown bits on here, which is exciting. And I'm gonna add my cooked grains, which I used brown rice because it's what I had, but you could use farro or wheat berries or spelt berries or any whole grain, even like, I'm sure that barley would be nice too. So this is about, I'm gonna eyeball it. It says 2 cups. I'm just gonna toss these and cook these and kind of saute them for about 2 minutes until they get nice and toasty but not dried out. So I've definitely had that where I've overdone it with whole grain frying and they're chewy and nice, but they do get like extreme when you kind of take them overboard. The old cook and toss. Okay, so these have been cooking for a couple of minutes and I'm just starting to smell whole grain scent wafting through the air. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. There's a little bit of browning on the edges. They smell so nice. Actually, this is something. This smell is really nice. So I'm gonna dump in the kimchi. At this point, I'm going to turn the heat off and add back in the mushrooms and the bacon. And this kimchi didn't have a lot of juice, so I'm actually just going to steal a bit of juice from the jar just to give it a bit more moisture. And then we're just kind of rewarming the mushrooms and the bacon. They're still pretty warm though. This looks good. So I think that's done. And then I'm gonna add just a handful of cilantro, roughly torn because I don't feel like chopping it. The last step is to fry an egg, or fry a couple of eggs. So that's it. Once the eggs are fried, I mean, you could definitely plate this up, but I kind of like it straight out of the skillet. It feels like that kind of thing to me. So I'm just going to lay the fried eggs on top. That's nice. Kind of looks like a heart, doesn't it? And then optional step is to drizzle with a bit of sesame oil and hot sauce. So I think I'll take that option. If anyone's ever overdone it with sesame oil in their past, they know to be careful. I've definitely overdone it before. It's very strong stuff. And then I've got some of my homemade chili oil, which it just feels like the right thing here, you know? So that's it. That's the fried grains with mushrooms and bacon and kimchi, and it looks insane, and I'm so excited to take a bite. I'm going in. Okay, I'm gonna definitely have to get into one of those yolks. Give me a late night or a late morning. I'd be happy with this anytime. Next up is Leeks with potato chips. And chives, but I don't have chives. So it's Leeks with potato chips, and I'm pretty excited about this because I do like putting potato chips on things like burgers or sandwiches, but I've never really put potato chips on anything else. So I've got 4 leeks here. These are on the small side. Leeks vary in size quite a bit, so depending on how big yours are, you might need more or less. So I'm gonna cut the dark green parts off, and if you're a veggie stock maker, you can definitely throw those bits into your veggie stock. And then I'm going to cut them in half lengthways and give them a really good wash because, as you can see, they're super dirty. I kind of feel like as I'm doing this, I'm wishing that I would have kept the root end on because then they would be holding together better. I think they're going to fall apart this way, but I'm going to do my best. Okay, nice clean leeks. Falling apart though. Really should have held those together with the root end, but you live, you learn. I have a cast iron pan and it already looks to me like it's a bit small. So I think I might have to use a different pan. This is a non-stick, but I think it'll do a better job because it's wider. Rinse the leeks, pat them dry, season all over with salt and pepper. Heat a large dry skillet over medium-high heat for 2 minutes. Add leeks to the pan, cut side down to cook. I hope this pan is big enough for them. Yeah, that's pretty good. Couple more that might not make the cut. I'm just gonna lay those on top. These leeks are gonna take about 4 minutes on the cut side so that we get a nice char. Hopefully we get a nice char. So while we're waiting, I'm gonna tell you about the chicken cutlets with spicy coconut dressing. These were very, very nice. Put some grated serrano pepper, some grated garlic and ginger into a bowl, and then added some lime juice to that and a bit of salt. And into that I added some coconut cream, which is just the thick part of the coconut milk. Next I pounded out the chicken thighs. So it says to work with 1 chicken thigh at a time, but I'm too impatient for that. So I worked with all 4 and I smushed them between some parchment paper and pounded them out with a bottom of a pot, which is what I had. I will say that I could have pounded them out more. I think the more the merrier, because then it's really nice and thin and you get lots of surface area and you can get them really nice and crispy. Then I seasoned them on both sides with salt and I heated a pan. I had a cast iron pan. It was a little on the small side, so I had to work in batches, but basically just added some oil and started frying the cutlets until they were really nice and crispy. So that meant cooking them almost all the way through on one side, and then just flipping them and finishing them on the other side. Once they were done, I moved them over to a platter and dealt with the lettuce. So this is iceberg lettuce, which I'm such a fan of because it's so crunchy. And I just washed the iceberg and then tore it into chunks. And then this is when I realized that the bowl I used for the dressing was too small because I was supposed to just toss the lettuce right in there, but I had to upgrade because my bowl wasn't big enough. So I added the iceberg to the dressing into a bigger bowl and tossed that around, and then I added some cilantro to kind of mix in there as well. Served that up on a couple of plates, salad first, chicken cutlets on top, and this was so delicious because really cold, crunchy lettuce with really crispy, salty chicken fat and meat. It's just the best. This was really good. I'll definitely make this again. Oh yeah, they're definitely charred. So these kind of creep up on you. I didn't think that these would char so easily, but they're lovely. Look at that. Next step is to turn them over, which we did, and add ghee and 2/3 cup of water to the skillet. So I don't have ghee, but she is giving us the option to switch that out for coconut oil or 50-50 mix of veg oil and butter. So I'm gonna do the veg oil and butter option because that's what I have. So a couple tablespoons of butter, or a tablespoon and a half or so. Just gonna chuck that around. Some veg oil real quick. And then some water. Okay, yeah, it got a little smoky in here. This is why I disabled the fire alarm. And then we're almost done. We're just gonna cook these for a couple minutes until they're tender. And I'm gonna get the potato chips ready. It says 1 cup of chips, which I don't really know how to measure that, so I'm just gonna chuck on a handful, I think. They're really nice and soft. I think I can just do it in one fell scoop here. Yum. You ready? This might be messy. Yum, I love that. And I don't have chives, but I do have some parsley, so I'll just rip a few bits of that on top. Look at that. Got a perfect bite here with a bit of chip and a bit of leek. That's good. I think I could use a bit more salt, so I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of Himalayan over the whole thing. I feel like they don't put enough salt on chips these days. Maybe it's just me. This is nice. So the Leeks are really melty and sweet. They've got this kind of delicate floral sweetness. And then the crunchy chips are just like, yeah, whatever. We just want to be crunchy and salty and just kind of cut right through the leaky softness. I love it. That's it for the recipes from Where Cooking Begins. There are tons of other ones in here that I would like to make that I haven't yet. There's a charred broccoli salad in here. There's some nice desserts too. There was a chicken ragu with polenta that looked really good. The one thing I'll say in this cookbook, which I used to subscribe to and now I've changed my tune on, is that there's not a lot of measurements for the salt. It's a lot of add salt to taste or sprinkle of kosher salt. But I've actually recently kind of decided that I really support measurements for salt because salt changes the game. It changes everything. And yeah, everyone's got a little bit of a different taste. So what one person might think is too salty, the other person might not. But I do think that there's a sweet spot there. And I do appreciate recipes that tell you how much salt to use. Because if you use a pinch and it's supposed to be a teaspoon, it'll taste completely different. So that's one thing that's one little commentary on this book. But overall, I really love it. I think this is a pretty great book to have. Lots of ways to kind of bust you out of your rut and think about things a little bit differently, think about ingredients a bit differently. So I'm a fan. Always a fan, still a fan, just a fan, you know? So anywho, thanks so much for tuning in. It means a lot to me when you come back and watch my videos, and it means everything to me when you click the like button and subscribe and share with friends and all that stuff. So thanks so much for doing all that. And I look forward to seeing you next week.